Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, looking around at the world right now, whether you're focusing in on Trump and the whole Epstein situation and how he's in a lot of ways basically said that if you believe in the Epstein hoax, you're no longer one of my followers, which I feel like is a pretty extreme statement, especially to those of us that have been covering Epstein for quite some time and are very well aware of the global pedophile blackmail rings that our intelligence agencies are running. So there's that whole thing, which I think has caught a lot of people off guard. But then you also have the advancement of AI and this digital infrastructure and Palantir and the frightening prospect of some sort of digital control grid. But then if you go deeper, you start to hear whisperings of some sort of geophysical event, something that the elites have been preparing for a very long time, something maybe in the 2027, 28, 29, 30, that there's something supposedly that is coming. And you look at all of this together, and then not even to mention the theater of DC and what's happening with Pam Bondi and all this, it just feels like if there's one word I could use to summarize the world right now, it's chaos. Chaos. Nothing that we have expected is happening. Nothing that we have wanted are we seeing really kind of play out in the world right now. It just feels like it's just complete chaos. And Europe is upside down, and there's the immigration crisis, and you look at communities falling apart, not even mentioning the weather warfare. And I'm not sure if it's weather warfare at this point, or just if mankind has screwed with the weather so much that it's just spiraling out of control now, right? Maybe these are intentional floods that they're creating, proactively, or maybe they've just messed with something so much and man attempted to play God so much that the whole plan is backfiring now. I mean, it's hard to make sense of it. But joining me today is my good friend, Todd Callender. And why do I think he's a good person for this kind of conversation? Well, because he's someone that looks at the big picture. And he doesn't just look at one little slice of it. He sees things from a very, very broad perspective. And that's how I like to look at things. I hate just honing in on one thing and thinking, oh, this one politician is going to fix everything. Or it's like, it's so much bigger than that. And if we're trying to understand where we're at in the world and how we move forward, we can't do that without rooting ourselves spiritually and asking ourselves, well, where are we at in this battle of good and evil? What side am I on? Am I doing a good job fighting it? Are we winning? Is good advancing in the world? Is the evil retracting in the world? Or is the opposite happening? And so there's no strong agenda for today's conversation with Todd. It's just going to be a sober discussion of where the world's at and how can we potentially make a little more sense of what's going on around us. Because right now it feels quite chaotic. I'm not sure what you think. Let me know in the comments. But for me, it just feels like there's chaos everywhere you look. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out how to find some sort of sense of centeredness amidst the chaos. And hopefully this interview can help me do that and help you do that as well. So please enjoy the show and enjoy this interview with my good friend, Todd Callender. Mr. Todd Callender. It's been, I feel like it's been way too long, and I've been really looking forward to this discussion. So thank you for being here.
Always my pleasure. Seth, you're a brother in this battle, a brother in Christ. It's always a joy to be with you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate those words. And yeah, one of the reasons why I like talking to you is that I feel like that you and I are on very similar wavelengths, right? Which it's always nice to talk to someone that you resonate well with, and it's easy to have those conversations. But also that I think that there's a lot of people that, if you take the pie of what's happening in the world, there's a lot of people that have a hard time seeing more than a few slices of it. And I've always been a kind of person that I like to look at what is the whole pie, like what's everything that's happening. And I see that you're someone that does the same, that you know what's happening with biotech, with AI, with health freedom, with kind of you're aware of the elites and the rulers, and you kind of get all these things. There's certain guests that I have on. Yeah, there you go. There's certain guests that I have on that, like they only see one slice of it, and I might go somewhere else, and they can't really follow into that and make sense of it. But you do, and I think it's especially important for people like you and I to have these kinds of conversations right now, because I feel like that if you look around the world right now, there is just so much confusion And when Trump got in, when Trump won, if you would have asked me, say 6 months ago, hey Seth, where do you see things at? Say 6 months into Trump's term, where would you see things at? I would have thought, oh gosh, well, we would have been, Epstein list obviously would have been released early on, as we were told, right? We would have seen probably the IRS kind of being dismantled, probably some high level arrests, probably some pretty significant changes, and there have been. We've closed up the border. We've been, ICE has been really active, so there has been something that have happened, but especially with the recent kind of just, I guess, noise about Epstein, and how Trump has responded to it. I mean, because these are things that you and I have been talking about for years, child sex trafficking rings and the elites and the currency of blackmail and pedophilia and the role of the agencies, CIA, Mossad, et cetera, in running, these rings, right? And yet now we're being told that it's kind of a hoax. And actually, I'll pull, to kind of finish my initial point and then let you talk, I'll pull up just one tweet from Trump. I'm not going to read the whole thing. He's talking about basically, the various, radical left kind of lies. Obviously, the Steele dossier, the 51 intelligence agencies, the laptop, the whole Russia, things. Legitimately, these are absolutely hoaxes that were. These are lies that were told to steal the 2020 election, to demonize the conservatives that were saying, hey, this Hunter guy is doing some shady stuff on his laptop, right? So these are all make sense, but then he says their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past supporters have bought into this BS hook, line, and sinker. So there's a few things here. One is that he's, I mean, if I'm reading the room properly, reading the tweet properly, that if you still believe in the idea of the Jeffrey Epstein Island and that he was running a blackmail operation, that you're no longer one of his current supporters. He's kind of pushing you to the side with a capital past, right? Saying that you're no longer here. But also that it's called a hoax because if you look at the other hoaxes were specifically, those were weapons pointed at Donald Trump. But if you look at the Epstein hoax, it's actually, I would say it's far more incriminating to the Democrats, right? If you look at the flight logs, you look at Clinton, you look at a lot of the major A-list Hollywood celebrities or music producers, or it seems like it would be more likely that the left would be calling it a hoax and that Trump would be the one saying, we got to get to the bottom of this and make some arrests. And I don't know, like I call me a conspiracy theorist, but I think that there was some pretty shady stuff going on that island and that airplane, and I would like to see us get to the bottom of it. But anyway, wherever you want to jump in, Todd, how do you process all this?
Well, the inconsistencies are astounding to me, to be frank about it. But you go back to the original precept that you and I have been talking about for ages, and that's the owner class. Their motto is Ordo ab Chao, right? They want to create order from chaos. What would you call this? Chaos, right? We're confusing the American public, or frankly, humanity. It makes us malleable, right? To fit into certain channels and into a predetermined outcome. And so crashing the economy was the plan. That has not happened. Getting everybody injected, sick and dying, also didn't happen. A lot of people did, but we're still here. So all of these things seem to be a part of the plan in furtherance of the eradication of our species, Seth. I don't know what Mr. Trump is saying or doing these days, or why he's saying these things, but it's inconsistent with some of his earlier things. So, for example, the very first executive order he signed in his first presidency dealt with child trafficking and the invocation of something called IEPA, the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which allows the U.S. government to seize assets abroad based on certain criminal conduct, allegations of conduct. So it seems really odd to me. For 15 years, right, we've been hearing about this. You have a conviction of Jeffrey Epstein in Florida, albeit he didn't really serve the time. I guess he would go about his business during the day and check in at jail at night. But nonetheless, there's a conviction, right? that he was a convicted child predator, period. You have first person testimony of lots of victims who have filed lawsuits, who have been paid compensation for the rapes against them, for the sexual assaults against them. So I mean, those are facts. And how do we arrive at facts? One determinable way is in a court of law. That's what trials are for, arriving at facts. That's what trial courts do, find facts. So we have a lot of evidence that is factual, that this actually did happen. Little St. James is real. I live in the Caribbean. I've seen the island. I haven't been on it, but I've flown over it. And I've certainly landed in St. Thomas, which is right next to, it's all of maybe a mile away from the airport in St. Thomas. All of that is very real. It did happen. Everybody's seen the flight logs of the airplane. So to say that none of this is real is very odd to me. It's counterintuitive, and I don't know the motivations therefore, but you got pictures of the Pam Bondi and these people holding up folders saying, we got it all, here's the list, and now the list doesn't exist. So other than the fact that there's a lot of chaos around, which is how I look at this, because in the midst of all this, everybody's distracted and worried about the Epstein case, not that it doesn't deserve attention. But in the meantime, we have artificial intelligence being integrated into our government. The very same program being used, this is Palantir, the very same program used to identify people targets in Gaza and eliminate them, right? It studies them, it assigns a social credit score based on their social media, their conversations, who they hang out with, and then it decides whether they live or die autonomously. That is being integrated into our government as we speak, funded by the big, beautiful bill. The executives in charge of the tech companies, MITRE, NVIDIA, Palantir, are being made lieutenant colonels, that's O5s in the Army, meaning that civilian oversight has been shifted aside. This is now a military operation, hardly any different than Operation Warp Speed was a military operation. So here we find ourselves back again in medical martial law. Our rights continue to be suspended, if not revoked. And we move down this trail over and over again towards the eradication of our species come hell or high water. So I kind of look at this Epstein stuff as a distraction to keep us from focusing on the real issues, which is our survival, Seth.
Exactly. And that's, it's an interesting point because, like, to me, the Epstein stuff, it's not about Epstein per se, right? It's actually that people want justice, right? Like, right. People want justice and truth. And as you've mentioned, you mentioned that, in the court of law, he was found guilty of, taking advantage of, and he was a predator, right? He was trafficking children, right? Like, there's no two ways about it. And when you look at that, and you look at the depth of what he was involved with, but then you also look at Ghislaine Maxwell. You look at her father, who was very kind of openly a Mossad, asset or agent, chief. There you go. And you start tying these things together, and then you look at so then you have Mossad that comes into it, and then. And not to mention, Epstein, there's a lot of things, I think there's people that very quickly will say, Epstein's a Mossad agent. I think it's way more complicated than that. I think the CIA, Mossad, I think the Five Eyes, I think a lot of these intelligence agencies, it's not as black and white as we make it. However, you look at the role of Israel in that. You look at the release of the JFK files that did happen, right? Give credit where it's due that we did see that, but also you saw that in JFK files, a lot of it did tie in to Israel and to Mossad and to the CIA and the kind of incestuous relationship between these agencies. And then you look at where things are at with the Middle East and Israel and the loyalty a lot of our politicians have to Israel and all this stuff. You start looking,
like all but one.
Well, there you go. Thomas Massey, who now Trump is trying to primary, right, and get rid of, right? The one guy that
he's like the only guy.
Yeah,
seriously, I think he's the only guy that didn't take AIPAC money. And sorry, I just
go
want
ahead.
to add
Please do
before you move on.
Yes.
I also find it interesting from a timing point of view that you got the head of a foreign state, Bibi Netanyahu, goes to the White House and demands the attention of the top level decision makers in Washington, D.C. in the executive branch. And immediately thereafter, we have this change in the whole Epstein paradigm. And so you raise the subject, and I appreciate that, because it has to be stated, that at the end of the day, our government appears to be largely controlled from Tel Aviv.
Ladies and gentlemen, our world is being poisoned. Every day we're exposed to more chemicals sprayed into our skies, leaching into our food, and polluting our air and water. From pesticides and heavy metals to hormone disruptors and synthetic additives, these toxins are bombarding our bodies and silently destroying our health. But there's something you can do to fight back, and it starts in your gut. Kimchi One from Brightcore Nutrition contains over 900 strains of beneficial probiotics that will help flush toxins, restore gut balance, and support your immune system. Because when your gut is strong, your body can resist. You'll feel the difference. Better digestion, more energy, clearer thinking, stronger immunity, and even improvements in your skin, hair, and metabolism. And this isn't just hype. Studies show that fermented foods like kimchi can reduce the risk of obesity, improve blood sugar, and support whole body wellness. Kimchi One is all natural, non-GMO, dairy-free, gluten-free, and 100% made in the USA by a company that actually cares about your health. And today, you can get an exclusive offer just for my viewers, 25% off with your code MANINAMERICA by clicking the link below, or call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. So give them a call now at 888-575-6488, and their educated staff will make sure that Kimchi One is right for you. Again, that's 888-575-6488. All the links and information are in the description below.
I mean, that just is what it is, right? They're all taking money. It's not like this is a secret. I believe that President Trump also took money. I'm not accusing him of anything other than the fact that we should have full disclosure of all of it. Right? And then we can make up our own minds. It bothers me that first we had Chinese embedded in our government, right? Governors, Thousand Lights program or Thousand Talents program. Dianne Feinstein with a Chinese PRC intel guy as her driver, amongst others. Swalwell. I mean, the list goes on and on. We have foreign agents that simply acquired our politicians who come and go, but the permanent bureaucracy never changes, right? That's the illusion. That's the magic trick, is that we're all worried about this illusion of choice, who we elect. The reality is that those are all chosen for us. It doesn't matter who wins because they're all controlled. And now we can see that, except perhaps Massey and maybe a handful of others. But for the most part, our government and every government is controlled by the permanent bureaucracy. These people are there for 30 or 40 years, and they have their marching orders and their plans. So if our politicians are bought, if they're compromised, what makes us think that the permanent bureaucracy are not?
Exactly. Well, I want to pull up a tweet from David Icke, because I think that this is what something you're kind of touching on too. So, this is back from June 30th. So Alex Jones or Owen Schroyer had done an analysis saying, has Israel tapped President Trump's operations to help manipulate him into re-entering the Israel-Iran war? Talking about these things, but then David Icke said something, and I don't agree with everything he says, but he also, I think he sees things from a very different level, a very kind of broad level. He says, there's a level way above Trump, Iran, and even Israel that is orchestrating all this, and levels above that. They are just pawns. At the level of real power, shadow power, the politicking is only theater to control public perception and divert attention. If you don't realize that, then what happens day by day can be bewildering. Once you see where the real power is and what its goals are, it suddenly all makes sense. First step, Trump is not being manipulated in anything. He knows his place and does what he's told. And I think it's important because, I've become, I've in a lot of ways, I've always hated politics, really since I was kind of, college age. I just thought like it just, you couldn't trust either side of it. And I think Trump, kind of brought a lot of fresh air, into the situation in 2016. And we saw some big changes and everything. But I feel like that the one of the big things that I've seen and come to in the past couple of months is it's like, Seth, you allowed yourself to get pulled back into watching what's happening politically. but actually, like, everything at that level is just theater. And whether it's scripted theater where everyone's just saying what they're supposed to say, whatever, or whether it is an unintentional theater that actually has no real substance, the reality is that what's actually happening in this world, I really believe there are levels and levels and levels above Trump. And I think that for people to have this idea that this one man can come in because, oh, well, he's worth what, 6 billion or 8 billion, or, well, yeah, he's up against families that are worth trillions of dollars that have ruled the world for thousands of years, these bloodlines, right? This, just calling it for what it is, right? I think that we have to kind of go back to, okay, where do we really have control? And I think I even look at myself as being naive to think that Trump could come in and dismantle the deep state and just get rid of the Federal Reserve and do all these things. It's like, well, that would imply he has a lot of power. I think it would imply that he has much more power than he really might.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. And maybe he was completely unaware about, how much power he thought that he actually had. Deception is the art of Satan. Right? And truth is the tool of God. So the only way to really survive this and ferret it out is to find out what the truth is. And that's why we do what we do, right? In furtherance of our survival, frankly, as God's creations, because that's the fight that we're in. If you look back to the days of Babel, what really angered God was the chimeric changing of God's creations into something different. How is that different from this moment in time today? That was the very argument that I made to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court is, hey, these things are gene modification shots. They're changing people into a new species. And the sad part is the court had already opined on this and said, yeah, it's fine. The new species is owned. Right? So we're back to those same days again with a slightly different background. It really, truly is, Seth. And so, look, at the end of the day, I think this is kind of a revelations thing. And every day we go forward fighting for the truth to come out is our best weapon and our best hope. Because at least when we do this job, we give people the opportunity to think for themselves. Otherwise, they're getting programmed through these devices. They're getting programmed through media and every other lie, right? Including contents in your food supply, your water supply, your air supply, and as we understand the paradigm, for example, having been poisoned our whole lives through big pharma, through vaccines, through medicines, all of which have horrible side effects. Chemtrails are a thing, right? Aerosol injections. Now the truth is out. People are trying to do something about it. So when we have the power of the truth, at least it gives us the empowerment to do something about it and reject it, right? Like half the world probably, in my view, rejected the shots in their own way, including a shout out to Dr. Kirk Moore, by the way, who was acquitted. I don't know if you know his story, but God love him.
Actually, I'm interviewing him tomorrow because I interviewed him maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think we did a show together, kind of bringing attention and calling attention to his case and everything. And so now that he and I had a really special kind of connection, and he reached out and said, "Look, you're one of the main people that I want to give an interview to."
Beautiful.
And I think he might have actually been meeting with Pam Bondi this past week. I think he actually was able to meet with her. So,
well, I mean, there's another one. I mean, so she was the AG in Florida, right, when all of this stuff unfolded. So what I'm trying to say is, you see the same people over and over again. He's a wonderful result of the truth. And the truth is that this was poison, and I have a right. I mean, effectively, it was his defense. I have a right not to poison people, right? So that's the tools that we have to have because it's freedom of choice. It's God gave us really one gift, and that is free will. But that's what's being manipulated, right? Is our free will is being manipulated, it's not being given the whole story. So I think if people maybe sit back a little bit and then they pick out the kernels of truth that just simply are finders of fact. This is what it is. You can reject it all day long. It doesn't change the fact that the truth is here. And if we cling to that, then we can better understand the true paradigm. But the reality, Seth, is this. We are in the midst of an eradication program. Our species is being made extinct. It is up to us. Nobody is coming to help us. We have to fight for our survival.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I feel like I'm constantly asking myself, what do we do, right? What can we do about this, right? Where do we have control? And you'll see, right? There's the people that are saying, okay, hey, we just got to get out there and win the midterms or get our guy in the office, or, there's all these different levels of what you can do. And, and I'm a big believer, obviously, in preparedness. And I think it's one of the most important things we can do, especially now. Yeah. It's like we have to be able to kind of figure out more, sustainable off-grid living, more resilience, having more control over our own food supply chain, right? Going from either your backyard or your local farmer to your table is as good as it should be. Everyone should be aiming for that. So there's that aspect of it. But I also think that when I take a giant step back, I'm reminded that we, in a lot of ways, are being controlled because we are being lied to so deeply. And I think that the greatest lie, actually, is the lie that covers up who we really are as human beings, and that that we truly are made in God's image, and that we are divine, that like we are extremely powerful spiritual beings, right, with God inside of us, right? When we tap into our faith and we tap into the wisdom that's buried deep inside of us, an ancient wisdom that God gave us, it's still there. Like that's actually what I think the most important thing that we can do. But I think that to tap into that, like it's like almost like if there's a ladder that allows us to climb back up that place, that ladder is tradition and morality and virtue. Right. And that we have to be focused on climbing that ladder and climbing and getting back to living a virtuous life, right? As a human being, right? As God intended. And the more we do that, because you can see that that's where the evil extracts their power. It's through the chaos and confusion and through the separation of who we are. Like the lies of even the origin of man, right? Like our real history. Like I love diving into this stuff, getting into like some of the Tartaria and the hidden technology and old civilizations that have been covered up, and the wisdom. And they've taught us that the ancients were stupid, Neanderthals, and that we're the most advanced because we can send rockets to the moon, but it's the opposite, right? And that's what I think is really important for humanity to go back to. That is that really? like we're still here. Right? As much as they're trying to exterminate us, we're still here because God wants us here, because he has a purpose for us here.
Beautiful. I think that was actually beautifully stated, and you're absolutely right in every respect. I also am a huge fan of OOP arts, out of place artifacts.
Yeah.
Because they exist. It's factual. They dig something out of a 300 million year old deposit of coal. It is there. It does exist. Lots of news reports about giants of the past. And as you look at these things, you come to understand the biblical references, because they tie in. They really, truly do. And it's beautiful. So I would add to everything you just said, because I see it exactly the same way. The most powerful word in the English language, most every other language says it similarly, and that is no. Right? We are being deceived into compliance. And so when the answer is no, I'm not going to do your digital ID. No, I'm not taking your stupid shot. No, I'm not taking your central bank digital currency. Right? The power no, because there are so many of us. They cannot control us unless they fool us into a certain set of behaviors that benefits them. So the answer is no. And I think, rejecting the system, my God, it's got to be 4 years ago now, 25 million people that opted out of the whole taxing system and being used as collateral for the national debt. That's beautiful. It must be twice that by now. It's that kind of non-compliance, that rejection. We're not doing this. We're just not going to do it. So I'm with you 100%, but we need to exercise that power of no. School boards, you got to have your shots. Nope. And I see this a lot now. In fact, I saw a study earlier this week that religious freedom complaints, effectively exemptions from childhood vaccine schedule requirements, are twice what they were only a year ago. People are finding their faith and they're demonstrating it and saying, I'm not taking your stupid shot. I'm not giving it my kid because it violates my religious beliefs. How beautiful is that? 100% change in a year. People are finding their courage, they find their voice. The power of no is tremendous, particularly against these permanent bureaucrats who love the security of their long-term employment. They love that paycheck guaranteed by the government. They do a minimum amount of work, and all they got to do is enforce some stupid tick the box laws without thinking. Right? That's the problem. And the way I see it is this: when government provides 50% or more of the employment in any society, it is no longer a capitalist system. It's no longer a free market economy. And we're right at that 50% between state, city, local, county, blah, blah, blah. So we have to be on guard, and people have to figure out their own moral code. Are you going to enforce an immoral law? And by example, an extension from a judicial perspective, I've seen judges hold lawyers and others in contempt of court for even mentioning the words jury nullification. A jury has an absolute right to say that the law is unjust, and for that reason, we're not going to convict anybody. If juries find their courage, if people find their courage, we can nullify all of these things that are unconstitutional and anti-human.
Exactly. And I think that one of the part of this in taking a step back is looking at, and I've been working on a show about this for quite some time now that I'm still just piecing together, but that there are cycles and events that are well beyond the control of the so-called elites. And that there seems to be a lot that points to something happening around the 2027 to 2030 timeline, as it relates to a pole shift or something. And if you look at what a lot of the, again, the so-called elites are doing, the land that they're buying, the bunkers that they're building, the clock that Bezos has built. I'm sure you've seen the clock that he's built, which is strange. Then you look at that, then you look at this push for AI and for this building of the database of the human knowledge, right, to help humanity survive on the seed vaults. You look at all these things that are happening, and this is something I've come to recently, is that there's something much bigger that's happening here that these elites are frightened of. Right, like they're either trying to build rockets to go off planet, or they're building bunkers, or they're making preparations. But to me, all that shows you is that they're not actually in control, and that there's a timeline.
True.
Right, look at the flood. Right, go back to, again, we mentioned the days of Noah. Go back to that time when evil was running rampant. There was, I believe at that time, that there was a crossing of human DNA with fallen angel DNA, with Nephilim DNA, and there was a destruction of the seed of man that was happening at that time. There was rampant evil, and Noah knew. Right, he was told. Yeah. I think he spent 100 years, right, building an ark. Now at that time, he lived to be 800 years old or something like that, right? So, but there are things that are beyond what the controllers even have control over, and I think that this is where we're at in the stage of history. Is we're approaching something like this in history.
I see it the same way. From the beginning of this fight 5 years ago or so, I've been haunted by Matthew. I think it's 13:38 passage, but it's the wheat and the tares. You have to let the wheat grow up with the tares to figure out which is the wheat and which is the food, and the great harvest is coming. And it literally, it haunts me, and it has. So I see it the exact same way. Whatever event is coming, I'm not afraid of it. I'm good with God. I'm good with what's happened on life on this planet. And it will be what it will be, but I'm not going to run and hide. The reality is this: life is terminal, and it's also hazardous to your health. So, given that the outcome is the same, we are all going to die. The question only becomes, how do you want to live your life, and how do you want to die? And I'll die fighting for our species, fighting for my kids, grandkids at some point, I hope. But that's the point, is it not? What do we have to lose is really the question, Seth.
Exactly. And so, given that there are all of these distractions, and this is one thing in terms of Epstein, it's like you could say, yeah, it is a distraction, right? But it's not a distraction from the win of having Coca-Cola go back to cane sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup. Those are all distractions also. I think a lot of stuff, even the politicking, right? They are distractions from the much bigger things that are happening. And I do think that one of and I'd like to see what your thoughts are, but I think that one of the greatest existential threats that that we have right now as a species is robots and artificial intelligence. Like, I do think that, like, as Elon Musk, I think he said it's summoning the demon, or as Leo Zagami refers to as cyber Satan, right? I do think that that's something that fits into this overall picture. It does fit into, I think, some of these more apocalyptic type ideas of what's happening with the world. Why are the elites, so rapidly trying to advance AI and the robot race? Are they, is there going to be some sort of mass die-off event that they predict that's going to happen, that they're going to need to have a robot force to kind of replace the humans that don't make it through? I mean, there's that whole angle, which is kind of a rabbit hole in and of itself, but also just looking at what's happening with the development of AI. And that's something that concerns me greatly, actually. I'm way more concerned about AI than I am Epstein, right? As much as I want to have Epstein come out and I want to see who the perpetrators are and I want to have justice, and of course that's a given, but I'm worried about where the direction that AI is going, especially if it's left unchecked.
Oh, it's so true. So let me add to your calculus a few things to keep in mind. First and foremost, right? We already know genetic manipulation is a thing. Let us recall the taxonomy of a human, Homo sapiens sapiens, is defined as, quote unquote, a species to be experimented upon. If I haven't sent it to you, I'll send it to you again. Put it in the show notes, because that is a fact, right? That's the definition. We are a species to be experimented upon, which then begs the question, who's doing the experimentation? I think it goes to your point that there is a different species, an older one, whatever. We've been manipulated for thousands of years. We are livestock to them. So what do you do when your herd of cows gets too big? You cull the herd, or maybe you switch to sheep or whatever else. And now we see that they've taken procreation out of the hands of man, right? So now you get 3 people donated DNA to create 8 babies that are now on this planet. Those are artificially created people. They were genetically engineered. We don't know genetically engineered to be what other than they were genetically engineered to be something other than God's creation, right? Man and a woman create babies, God's creation, right? That's the divinity inside of us. Now you got science creating genetically modified beings that are not God's creation. And so when you see that there's a whole division in Health and Human Services, it's called the SynBio division, stands for synthetic biology, and their job is to genetically manipulate every plant and animal species on this planet. What they're doing is changing this planet from God's creation to their own creation. And they are, and Noah Harari talks about it, we are becoming gods through genetic manipulation. And that goes hand in hand with the AI that you talk about. They don't need humanity anymore as a slave class, because that's what we've been. Now they have everything that they need to do it without us. We're now a nuisance because we have a habit of saying no and thinking for ourselves.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's part of it. Actually, is creating a more compliant race, because I think that's actually one of the, if you look at this and if you are trying to understand this battle of good and evil, right? This battle that's happening, for me at least, I'm sure you're this, based on our conversations, you're in the same boat. You get to the place where you realize, wow, it's just a battle of good versus evil. It is a battle of the angels and the warriors of light that are trying their best to represent God and God's will and virtue and justice up against Satan's minions, right? And okay, so you get there. But then you realize but they don't have God on their side. If that's the case, it's like our general actually kicked their general out of heaven, right? So it's like, well, who's really the general that's in charge here? But I do believe, though, that one of the things that God gave us is free will, right? As you mentioned, the most powerful word that we have in this fight is no, right? We have the ability to say, I'm not going to do that. I will not comply. I will not send my kids off to your schools. I will not watch your degenerate TV programs. I will not inject myself with your DNA modifying technology. I'm not going to do that. But you can see that maybe as part of it is actually, and I've seen that I saw that with a lot of the people kind of diagnosing and looking, okay, what are the real effects of the COVID vaccine? That they saw mental changes, actually, that they saw people even kind of in essence, I saw a lot of people talking about how they felt like they got cut off from God. It's interesting, right? The sensation, the feeling of not hearing God talk to them anymore. And I think that that's actually what they're trying to do, is to create a race of beings that at the genetic level is no longer connected to God. And because I think that that's the only way that they think they can win, is to cut us off like that.
Well, they did. They did. So you may recall, part of the evidence that we put into the record, we served Lloyd Austin before he issued the order, was the military's very own study. They did a study on 44,000 service members and their families using the COVID shots. 178 people finished the clinical trial out of 44,000. Only 178 finished it. But of those that showed up to the clinical trial, they went home with 1,291 new diseases they didn't go to the trial with. The very first and most significant serious adverse event, otherwise known as a side effect, was the 1p36 gene deletion syndrome. That's a genetic trait. It's passed on, right, genetically. Somehow it was a side effect of the shots. That gene regulates your frontal cortex and your executive function. And what we found in the military, because we were tracking it, was pilots couldn't get through the training. They couldn't get through the programs to become pilots because they couldn't think. They couldn't reason. So when you talk about, effectively vax zombies, this is what we're talking about. Of those,
actually, I'll read this real quick. It says that the 1p36 deletion syndrome is a disorder that typically causes intellectual disabilities. Most affected individuals do not speak or speak only a few words. They may have temper tantrums, bite themselves, or exhibit other behavior problems. Most have structural abnormalities of the brain, and seizures occur in more than half of individuals with this disorder. Affected individuals usually have weak muscle tone and difficulty swallowing. Yeah. Interesting.
So this was a side effect of the shots. The very first side effect cited was that. And so how is it that a congenital disease happens as a side effect of a shot other than by genetic manipulation? It's genetic deletion. They deleted the gene that regulates your frontal cortex. And then we wonder why it is that people's brains are atrophying. And by the way, out of those 1,291 diseases, 1/3 of those were genetic diseases caused by the shots. And this study was by Pfizer, the DOD, and the FDA. They all did it together. And they did it a year in advance of rolling out the shots. In other words, I put into Lloyd Austin's hands, before he issued the order, his own study saying, hey, if you do this, you're going to frag your troops. By the way, one of the serious side effects was death, right? Death and disability, and we watched the numbers grow. They know this, Seth. What I'm trying to say is that it is a plan, and it's taken 5 years for humanity to understand that this has been a plan for a very long time, and we are neck deep in the middle of an eradication program, an extinction level event. And it's only now that humanity is embracing the truth. I just pray it isn't too late. And it's like, wake up, smell the coffee, get with the program here. You better start exercising your free will, or otherwise we're all gone. As long as we have the numbers, Seth, and I think really only half the world got these shots, or more than one shot for that matter. I think we got a chance, but it really takes humanity putting aside the divisiveness. It's so easy to to goat us into division through, well, that person's got green hair, or that person's, black, or whatever the case is. We're so easily manipulated. And if we can just remember we are all God's creations, right? At the end of the day, it's a brotherhood of humanity. We bind together in that solidarity and put aside all the rest of this crap. We have a fighting chance. But until that happens, as long as we stay divided, they will win.
Exactly. And that's why I think that having these conversations is so important, because if you look at the amount of division, like it's crazy. Like, I remember back in 2020 that it was kind of, you're on one or two, there's two teams, right? There was the pro-Trump and the anti-Trump, right? Back in 2020. And, but the people that were pro-Trump, that were cheering on the audits, the Cyber Symposium, the Maricopa audit, there was such a unified base that was behind Trump, that was fighting for election integrity. I mean, people really came together, and they had this sense that there was a coup, and that our country, our government has been overthrown, and it's probably related to China and other foreign hostile nations. But if you look at fast forward now to where we are now, if that was one group that was just kind of like the MAGA conservatives, like constitutionalists, etc., you probably think your 401k is safe, that it's growing, that it'll be enough for your retirement. But what if it's not? Here's the truth most people never hear. Your 401k was never designed to make you wealthy. It was created in a corporate boardroom to shift retirement costs and investment risk onto you. Designed to keep your money trapped, exposed to Wall Street crashes, inflation, and uncertainty you can't control. Until now. Right now, Americans are taking back control by turning to real assets like gold and silver. Noble Gold Investments has helped thousands protect their future by converting part of their retirement savings into physical gold and silver, so they can stop worrying about the market and start sleeping better at night. So talk to Noble Gold today and learn how safe and easy it is to roll over your 401k into a tax-advantaged precious metals IRA without penalties or headaches. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 to get your free wealth protection kit, including a step-by-step guide to get started. It's time to get your money out of the danger zone and into something real. Again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com. I think that now that's splintered into 20 different groups. You've got the pro-Israel, the anti-Israel. You've got the, Trump is a good guy, Trump is the Antichrist. You've got it's splintered into so many groups now that it's like, before we were just divided, left and right. But now the divisions, it's like they've put us in, and there's 30 different buckets. It's like, okay, well, what are you? What group are you on? It's like, okay, I'm anti-vax, pro-Trump, this, that, or the other. It's like, okay, you've got like 6 different criteria. Pro-Israel. The next guy is anti-vax, anti-Trump, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. It's just like there's all these different boxes now that people have become so divided. But I think that but what's happening though is, like you mentioned, chaos and order out of chaos. Is I think that there is so much chaos now that people don't know which way to look, like which way is up. It's like you're spinning underwater and you're trying to go to the surface, but you have no idea where the surface even is.
Yeah, that's good. So that's it. I think that's exactly right. It's shattering our consciousness, trying to make us malleable. I see it exactly the same way. But I guess this is the point then, isn't it? So that we, love your fellow human, because at the end of the day, we are really truly all the same. And when you were going through that list, it made me think of the LBGTQRSTV thing. What a bunch of nonsense. At the end of the day, who freaking cares? Why does that matter anyway? It's a distraction, and it creates chaos. Why would we give a crap about whether it's, I don't care. Do whatever you're going to do, man. You know what I mean? So I'm glad you said that. It's putting us into these buckets naturally would create division, us versus them, and that's what's got to stop.
And I think that one of the solutions that I see is just not identifying with a group. Like that's the thing. It's like I'm not in a bucket.
Good.
Like I'm in team humanity.
I'm not a bucket.
Right? Like what group am I? I'm of the group of be a good person. Like follow God. Live a moral life. Return back to tradition. Raise your children well, and that's what we have control over. Right? Because it's not like, oh well, here's my group and my group's going to save the world. It's like no, like the people that will save the world are the ones that step away from all the chaos they've created, right? But it's not easy because that chaos is addictive and it pulls you in. And you look at Twitter, you get on Twitter, it's like, oh, there's Laura Loomer versus Tucker Carlson versus this person, and David Icke's calling out Alex Jones, and Alex Jones is calling out Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan's doing this, and it's just like, oh my goodness, what's going on? It's like, okay, take a step back, maybe listen to that Calm Man in America podcast.
Yeah,
and just do your thing.
Yeah, I love this. And what you said is so beautiful and true. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. It's step back and then let the melee happen. I mean, again, it goes back to the Bible. The meek shall inherit the earth. That's what I was thinking as you're talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, do you have hope amidst all this? I know it's not as easy these days to find it, but do you have hope? And if so, where's it from?
Yeah. Well, I got tons of hope because first and foremost, we're still here. We weren't supposed to be. Right? The eradication process started circa 2020, and we are still here, Seth. We're both raising up kids, and there are other kids being born. I see them all around. That was not in the plans. And yet I see people finding their way, despite losing their jobs or whatever else, they're finding a way. We've been so cowed over our whole lives into fitting into what really is a Soviet model economy. You will be this, you'll get this education over here, you do that. And then people are rejecting it wholesale. They're growing food in their backyard. They're saying, no, I don't want my, fake meat from the grocery store. I'll go over here to Farmer, Brown. I love that because it's taking our dominion back. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I do have a lot of hope. And I also, I see people on the inside, Seth. Let's not forget there is a permanent bureaucracy that governs things that do have an effect on us, whether that's our water supply or electricity or whatever, rules that are enforced at the end of the day with guns. I'm seeing a lot of people starting to think for themselves, whether that's law enforcement or people in medicine or people in government that are just going, yeah, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. And it's slowing the whole program down. And you said it a while ago, you see a big event happening towards the end of, this decade. I do too. I've seen it referenced in many places that effectively the owner class have until December 29, 2029 to finish their job of eradicating us. I don't know what happens if they don't. All I know is that that's some deadline that they're trying to meet. And every day that we survive is glory. Every day that we survive brings more hope because it actually means what you said. God is our general. We're actually winning this thing in a very strange way simply by surviving. So if we can run out the clock, we win. Either way, we win, right? We're either going to die fighting for humanity's right to exist or we're going to cease exist anyway. It doesn't matter. Either way, we win as God's creations.
And I think that we have to survive. And I also think that along with that, what it means to be human has to survive. Because if we survive it, we lose our humanity.
Beautiful.
And we turn into complete heathens and there's no morality, there's no virtue, there's no tradition, and we cast it all out, then we haven't survived, even if our physical bodies are still here. And that's why I think it's so important for us to preserve these things, preserve these traditions. And if we've lost them, then go back to them, right? I think a lot of us have become very rootless. Our families have been broken up and moved across the country and across the world. Well, let's bring that back into focus again. And let's make sure that civility and morality and virtue, these are things that we are making sure they survive within the realm that we have control over.
I think that's magnificent. And I find that to be by itself very hopeful. So if you look, back at history, people conquering this and conquering that always was a divisive means when it didn't have to be. And I know you're a student of China and history. And if you look at when the Mongolians, raided China, the emperor said, absorb them, don't fight them, absorb them. They'll become Chinese. And he was right. And they did. So it goes back kind of towards your model, which is embrace humanity and let's find a way through it. I love what you're saying because when you look at Hollywood and their, post-apocalyptic scene, it's always, bands of roving people fighting each other,
Mad
which
Max.
is not what it. Yeah, exactly. But in reality, what we all know is that in order to survive well on this planet, it requires the use and participation of other humans. Is why there are colonies and there are states, right? We need each other. And so this is a really important part to what it is you're saying. I think it's beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, I've got my book coming out, Prep Like Noah, just for people that so it's still on its way. But part of what slowed it down is that, and I won't give you too many details now, but I'm building something along with it that's going to I think kind of serve that purpose of really bringing a lot of people together. And that's one of the, because that's kind of this, I guess you could call it an enlightenment in the process of like, wow, like actually to really survive and be prepared, we need community. and we need a way to build and strengthen community and to find the right people. And so anyway, I won't kind of tease it too much because I've mistakenly done it in the past. It's like, okay, Seth, where is it at? So it's coming though.
I'm excited about it. And I just wanted to add back into what you said, because when I first moved into the Caribbean, there was no OECD, there was no welfare, it didn't exist. We had blue laws, and you couldn't do liquor on the weekends, and everything closed down. And we had, people didn't beg on the streets. They didn't exist. Drug problems like that. I mean, people were looked after by their family and the church, not the state. When the one world government known as the OECD came in to every country and started making the state the church, right? They eliminated the Christian Council in this particular country, whereby no legislation could be passed unless it was godly. It was the first order of business. Everything went to crap after that. So your book sounds like the guiding principle of community in the way that it used to work, the way that it should work. We looked after each other, right? That was our mandate, and it was a better place.
It was. Well, Todd, I think this is the right place to kind of conclude our conversation on this upward trajectory of hope for the future, but not hope and faith in the government, not hope and faith in a political party or any of that. Just kind of hope and faith in the fact that God has given us what we need, and that we have to go back to that, and that's the way forward. That's how I live my life the best that I can, and I know that is the same for you in your life.
Absolutely. And the power of no. It's really the truth. I'm not doing what you want me to do because it's a bunch of nonsense. So it's beautiful. I can't wait for your book to come out. I won't pester you, but I want to know, so I'll be on the first copy.
I'll set it aside for you. Todd, thank you. Take care, and God bless you and your family.
God bless you and yours, brother. It's really good to be here. Thank you.
Of course. Do you keep hearing more cases of your friends and family getting a life-threatening diagnosis of cancer? Or perhaps it's even happened to you? Well, the unfortunate reality is that turbo cancer is now a worldwide epidemic. But the question we should all be asking is, what can I do about it? Well, the good news is that there are therapies that are working and proven in thousands of clinical studies. So one study on PubMed found that breast cancer's growth rate dropped by 40% in only 24 hours after using red light therapy. Another study on prostate cancer found that 49% of the over 400 male participants went into remission with just one red light therapy session. A lymphoma cancer pilot study showed that 3 out of 3 of the patients became cancer-free. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. And you can discover all this information and more in a special training program from investigative medical journalist Jonathan Otto, who will show you how you can use red light, including the specific wavelengths as proven by studies, for all different types of cancer, as well as tinnitus, weight loss, wrinkles, acne, dementia, cognitive function, depression, anxiety, long COVID, jab injuries, stem cell regeneration, lower back pain, sciatica, the whole array of autoimmune diseases, including thyroid disease, arthritis, lupus, and gut disorders, and so much more. In fact, you can get your own in-home red light therapy device risk-free, as you're completely covered by a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 3-year warranty. On top of that, we've got financing options so you can get it now and pay later. And the best thing, folks, is that this technology has become amazingly affordable. It's way less than you'd expect, with the smaller units costing only a couple $100. So just go to myredlight.com to make sure you don't miss out this free special training program and claim the extremely limited time bonus gifts and discounts, which include an additional 10% off with the coupon code SETH. Again, go to myredlight.com to get access to the free training. And if you make a purchase, make sure you use a promo code SETH, that's SETH, to get an additional 10% off the already heavily discounted red light therapy products.